Okay, so we are on to Unit 4, Lesson 2. And in the last lesson, we talked about how to graph quadratic functions in what's called standard form. In this lesson, I'm going to teach you how to graph quadratics in vertex form and intercept form. So those vocabulary terms are going to be important because they kind of outline what these forms look like and what kinds of features they give you of the graph. So I'm going to start with vertex form. And vertex form is this form, it's going to be y equals or f of x equals. Those mean the same thing. F of x is that function notation that we talked about before. Y equals is just showing you inputs or outputs. So it's y equals a, which tells us, the width of the graph. A also tells us if the graph opens up or down. So a times, parentheses, x minus h squared plus k. So the important part here is those values, h and k, all right? Those tell us the vertex, all right? Those tell us the vertex of our function, the highest or lowest point. And if we remember from our last lesson, the axis of symmetry is just the x value of the vertex. That's why I included that there, okay? So the thing to remember here is for our vertex, x minus h. So our vertex is always the opposite value of whatever that h value is. If it's x plus 5, our vertex is negative 5. If it's x minus 10, our vertex is at 10, whatever. Or 10, sorry, not whatever. 10, whatever the value of k is. So I'm going to show you that in this first example, kind of to get this down. So graphing this function, the first thing that I am going to give you is the vertex. The vertex of this function, we've got our h and k values. We've got 1 and negative 2. So our vertex is negative 1, negative 2. So that vertex, it's the opposite value of the number being added or subtracted from x, and then the same value as the number being added or subtracted on the end. So that's the first thing we know. Another thing we know is that it opens up, and it's going to be wider than our parent function. So those are some key features, all right? So the first thing I'm going to graph is our vertex, negative 1, negative 2. Now the issue for this is we need to know other points that we can graph to show the shape of this parabola a little bit better. It's not good enough to just guess and check. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a table, and I'm going to kind of center my points around the point negative 1, negative 2, that vertex. So I'm going to pick a couple of points, and I'm going to explain why I'm picking those points in a second here. So I'm going to pick the points negative 3 and positive 1, all right? And the main reason I pick those points is I want values to the left and to the right of my vertex, and I want values that come out to be whole numbers. So when I plug in negative 3, I get out 0. When I substitute in 1, I get out 0. Now, we're going to go more in depth about solving for zeros later on in this unit, but right now, it's more about us picking. You could have picked negative 2 and 0. You could pick whatever you want, but you're picking x values centered around that vertex, substituting them in, and getting out values. So that means I got negative 3, 0, and 1, 0. So we know that this opens up. We know that it's a little bit wider than our parent function. So the main thing for us to do is to choose values, all right, that are around our vertex and substitute them in to the function and get out outputs. That's what I did. So you can pick any points you want, provided they're on the graph, but I pick values that are near my vertex. Okay, so that's vertex form. Finding the vertex, the points are literally there. The point is literally there in the function. You just have to pick two other points to plot to get your graph, all right? So next is intercept form. So what this intercept form tells us is it tells us the x intercepts, okay? Tells us the x intercepts. So it's got kind of the same thing. It's got a on the front, but it's got x minus p and x minus q. So in this function, the intercepts are p and q. Now, you see how it's x minus p, x minus q. It's the opposite sign. So if it was x plus 5, one of the x-intercepts would be negative 5. If it was x minus 7, it would be positive 7 for one of the intercepts. So the idea is our axis of symmetry is halfway between our x-intercepts, okay? And we can find that axis of symmetry by taking the average. That's why I wrote this in here. By taking the average of our x-intercepts. And it's the same thing. If A is positive or negative, that tells us it opens up or down. So in example 2, I'm going to lay out all the important information. So we're going to find both the x-intercepts. We're going to find the axis of symmetry. We're going to find the vertex. So it's going to take a little bit more work with this one. But from this, our x-intercepts, x minus 1, that means one of our x-intercepts is the point 1, 0. Our other x-intercept, x minus 5, our other intercept is 5, 0. So I'm going to go and I'm going to plot those right away. Okay? And then our axis of symmetry is going to help us a little bit, and I'll show why. Our axis of symmetry is the average of our intercepts. So the average of 1 and 5. So 1 plus 5 divided by 2, which is 6 divided by 2, which is 3. So our axis of symmetry is at x equals 3. So I'm just going to draw it so that we know our vertex lands on this vertical line, okay? Now our vertex is a point. It's going to have the point with an x value of 3. We don't know the y value yet. The way we find that y value, we basically just plug that y value, or that x value, in to our function. Sorry, x minus 3, 3 minus 1, and then 3 minus 5. So I'm just substituting that axis of symmetry into the vertex into the function to find the y value of my vertex. So let me say that one more time. To find the y value of my vertex, I'm going to substitute in my axis of symmetry to get an output. Okay, so that's negative 2 times 2 times negative 2. So that really becomes positive 8. So our vertex is the point 3, 8, 5, 6, 7, 8. So when we draw this, we just got to get that U shape. I'm not going for art awards here, but got to get that general U shape down. We got to know that it opens down because of that negative 2 on the front. So the intercepts, 1 and 5, because we have x minus 1, x minus 5. So that tells us those intercepts. Okay, so guided practice. What I'm going to suggest, try these, graphing them kind of like I showed you, then double check with Desmos. That's fine. But graph these kind of like I showed you, and then try them out. So you're going to do these, and then we'll move on to the last example. Okay, so for this, I'm sorry about the lack of room for number 1 in the guided practice. The vertex is the point 3, 4. That comes from this x minus 3, and then the plus 4 in the end. So I graphed my vertex, I graphed my axis of symmetry through that right away. That was my very first step in this example, okay? Now, past this, I picked the points, x values of 2 and 4, substituted them in. I got these 2 points. It made sense because the graph opened down. So that's my quadratic function graphed as a parabola for number 1. For number 2, I got my x-intercepts right off the bat, negative 2 and positive 4. The axis of symmetry was the average of those two, which was 1. Graphed that, and then I substituted that in to my function to get the point 1, negative 9 for my vertex. So I could have, sorry, kind of messed that up. Should have labeled vertex is that point, and then this line was my axis of symmetry. So that's an important thing to have down, okay? So just, I'm going to try to give you some practice just on this right now, and then have you move forward, and then practice this double distribution after you practice some graphing. Now, it's hard to practice that graphing without a pencil and paper copy. If you have a chance to print that off, that's great. But if you need things, if you need paper copies of things, I'm at school every day. If you want, you can send someone there. If you want, I can deliver it to you, okay? I can just drop it in your mailbox if you want, but just let me know. Communicate that thing. The quizzes is going to be your practice, okay? That's what I'm going to require. If you want to use the paper and pencil copy of the practice, that's fine too. But I'm just going to expect you to do the quizzes. If you want to do something separate or different to still be counted as the practice, you talk to me and we can work that out. Okay, so I'm going to have you move on to the next step in the lesson, which would probably be just some practice with graphing and determining the important parts of these graphs.